Lepidoptera migration. Many populations of Lepidoptera butterflies or moths migrate, sometimes long distances, to and from areas which are only suitable for part of the year. Lepidopterans migrate on all continents except Antarctica, including from or within subtropical and tropical areas. By migrating, these species can avoid unfavorable circumstances, including weather, food shortage, or overpopulation. In some Lepidopteran species, all individuals migrate, in others, only some migrate. Monarch butterfly tag to track its migration. Danaus plexippus migration map in North America. Tyriomala septentrionis migrate in millions between Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats in India. Catopsilia pomona migrate regularly in South India and Himalayas. The best-known Lepidopteran migration is that of the eastern population of the monarch butterfly, which migrates from southern Canada to wintering sites in central Mexico. In late winter, early spring, the adult monarchs leave the transvolcanic mountain range in Mexico for a more northern climate. Mating occurs and the females begin seeking out milkweed to lay their eggs, usually first in northern Mexico and southern Texas. The caterpillars hatch and develop into adults that move north, where more offspring can go as far as central Canada until next migratory cycle. The Danaids in South India are prominent migrants, between the Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. 3 species will be involved in this, namely Tyriomala septentrionis, Euploea cor, and Euploea sylvester. Sometimes they are joined by lemon pansy, Junonia limonias, common emigrant Catopsilia pomona, tawny coster, Acrea terpsichore, and blue tiger Tyriomala limnius. Definition. Migration in Lepidoptera means a regular, predictable movement of a population from one place to another, determined by the seasons. 2. There is no unambiguous definition of migratory butterfly or migratory moth, and this also applies to proposals to divide them into classes. 3. Migration means different things to behavioral scientists and ecologists. The former emphasize the act of moving, whereas the latter discriminate between whether the movement has been ecologically significant or not. Migration may be viewed as a behavioral process with ecological consequences. 2. Migration in Lepidoptera takes place in 2 of the 3 modes of migration identified by Johnson, 1969. In the first mode, also Johnson's first, the Lepidoptera move in one direction in their short lifespan and do not return. An example is the pierid butterfly, Asha monist, which breeds in Florida but sometimes migrates along the coast up to 160 kilometers to breed in more suitable areas. 2. In the second mode, Johnson's third, migration takes place to a place of hibernation or estivation where they undergo diapause and the same generation survives to return. The classic example is that of the nymphalid monarch butterfly, Danaus plexippus. 2. Adventive. Species that are recorded in unexpected areas, adventive species, are not considered to be migratory species, because these did not leave their habitat on their own strength. Examples are species that are imported as egg or caterpillar alongside of their host plants or individuals that were reared by a collector but have escaped. An example of an introduced species is Galleria melonella, which is found all over the world, because it is reared as food for captive birds and reptiles. At times it is difficult to decide if a species is adventive or migratory. Migratory species like Chrysodexis chalcites and Helicoverpa armigera would be able to reach Western Europe on their own, but are also common in greenhouses. Seasonal migration. Australian species Agrotis infusa spends the summer as an imago in the Australian Alps, and is sometimes found in buildings in large numbers. Lepidoptera migration is often seasonal. With species of which all individuals migrate, the population moves between areas in the summer and winter season or the dry and wet season. For species of which only part of the population migrates, seasonal migration is hard to determine. They can maintain themselves in part of their habitat but also reach areas where they cannot establish a permanent population. They only live there in the season that is most favorable for the species. Some of the species have the habit of returning to their permanent residence at the end of the season. Difference with bird migration. An important difference with bird migration is that an individual butterfly or moth usually migrates in one direction, while birds migrate back and forth multiple times within their lifespan. This is due to the short lifespan as an imago. Amazingly, the monarch receives no navigation instruction for the migration from their parents, unlike birds. 4-5 species that migrate back and forth usually do so in different generations. There are, however, some exceptions. The famous migration of the monarch butterfly in North America. This species migrates back and forth in one generation, though it completes only part of the journey in both directions in that generation. No individual completes the entire journey, which is spread over a number of generations. The imago of the last summer generation is born in North America, migrates to Mexico, Florida, or California and stays there for the winter. After the winter it migrates back to the north to reproduce. In a couple of generations, the monarch migrates north to Canada. The migration of the bogong moth in Australia. This species migrates from southeastern Australia to the Australian Alps in the summer to avoid the heat. After the summer it returns to reproduce. 6. Flight behavior. The small diamondback moth is a migratory species which can be found at altitudes of 100 meters. It is capable of covering over 3,000 kilometers. Migratory Lepidoptera are, in most cases, excellent flyers. Species like Vanessa atalanta are capable of managing a fierce headwind. In case of headwind, they usually fly low and are more goal-oriented. 7. During migration, some species can be found at high altitudes, ranging to up to 2 kilometers. 8-9 This is especially noteworthy for day-flying species like Vanessa atalanta, since the temperatures on these altitudes are low and day-flying species depend on the outside temperature to stay warm. It is thought that Vanessa atalanta produces enough body warmth during flight since it has also been recorded migrating at night. In the case of transcontinental migration where distances are large, the flying speed of the butterfly, of the order of 3 meters per second or less, is inadequate for timely completion of journey. The migration is carried out by relying on heavy winds, a persistent wind speed of 10 meters per second being able to provide a displacement of 300 to 400 kilometers in a single day. 10. For example, the painted lady, Vanessa Cardui, migrates from Africa to Spain aided by tailwinds. 11. That the migratory species are good flyers, is not the same as saying they are robust flyers. The small diamondback moth is also a migratory species that migrates 3,000 kilometers and can be found up to altitudes of 100 meters or more. 12. 13. Vanessa Cardui migration between North Africa and Europe. Navigation. To be able to migrate over long distances, species must be able to navigate. There are several ways they do this. Landscape. Lepidoptera use coastal lines, mountains, but also roads to orient themselves. Above sea it has been observed that the flight direction is much more accurate if the landscape on the coast is still visible. 7. Celestial navigation. Butterflies are known to be capable of navigation with the help of the sun. They can also navigate by using polarized light. The polarization of the sun's light changes with the angle of the rays, hence they can also navigate with cloudy weather. There are indications that they can even make corrections depending on the time on a day. Diamondback moths are known to fly in a straight trajectory which is not dependent on the angle of the sun's rays. 14. Tests have been performed to interfere with the biological clock of certain species by keeping them in the dark and then observing if they would choose for other flight paths. The conclusion was that some species did, and others did not. 15. Research on monarchs demonstrates that with removal of antennae, the location of the circadian clock, individuals do not localize in any one direction during flight as they do with antennae intact. 16. Night flyers cannot use sunlight for navigation. Most of these species rely on the moon and stars instead. Earth's magnetic field. A number of moths use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate, as a study of the stray hart and dart 17 suggests. Another study, this time of the migratory behavior of the silver Y, showed that this species, even at high altitudes, can correct its course with changing winds, and prefers flying with favorable winds, which suggests a great sense of direction. 18. A study in Panama of Aphris statira, which migrate in large groups annually, found that this species loses its navigational capacity when exposed to a magnetic field, suggesting they use the Earth's magnetic field to determine their direction of flight in migration. 19. Multigeneration migration. Painted ladies, Vanessa Cardui, are able to migrate over multiple generations. Genetic analysis of pollen grains transported by hundreds of butterflies collected across 10 countries allowed researchers to track down the origin of a migration event that took place over 9 months from 2018 to 2019. Most likely, the butterfly outbreak originated in northern Arabia and the Middle East, when vegetation was unusually abundant in late 2018 to early 2019. Their migration to Eastern Europe apparently spanned 2 or 3 generations and finally reached Western Europe during the summer of 2019. 20. Areas where migratory butterflies and moths can be found. Blue tiger Tyriamala limnaeus butterflies resting while migrating, Western Ghats, South India. Migratory Lepidoptera can be found on all continents, migrating within or from the tropics and subtropics. North, they can be found up to Spitsbergen, above the Arctic Circle. 13. Some migratory Lepidoptera have spread over most of the world. Some of these are pest insects, such as the diamondback moth, Helicoverpa armigera, and Trichopluginae. Examples of migratory Lepidoptera. Distribution map of Acherontia atropos. Red, all year. Orange, summer. In the Indian subcontinent, migrating Lepidoptera are common just before the monsoon season. Over 250 species are known to migrate during this period. 21. 22. On Madagascar, Chryseridia ripheus migrates between populations of 4 plant species of the genus Omphilea, the host plant of this species. The 3 western Omphilea species live in dry coniferous forests. The eastern species is found in the rainforest and is the only species that is green year-round. 23. Rhodometra sacraria is normally found in Africa, large parts of Asia and southern Europe. At times, it migrates north and can reach Central and Northern Europe. Vanessa cardui is found all over the world, except South America, at altitudes of up to 3,000 meters above sea level. Its home, however, are subtropical steppe areas. Vanessa atalanta is known to migrate between the Mediterranean region and Northern Europe. 24. The Australian painted lady, Vanessa kershawi, periodically migrates down the coast of Australia. 25. Occasionally, in periods of strong migration in Australia, these butterflies have been known to migrate to New Zealand. 25. The bogong moth also migrates biannually towards and from the Australian Alps. 6. Several South and Central American species of Araneae display a great peak in migratory behavior in certain years. In the years with a great number of migrating individuals, there are population explosions. Individuals migrate to the south and east. There is no real remigration to speak of. These moths feed on Omphilea species. These can be found in scattered populations all across South and Central America, but only part of the areas where they are found are a permanent habitat for these moths. Research suggests that the cause of the migration peak is an increase in toxicity when much of a single plant is eaten and decreasing toxicity when only small amounts of a certain plant are eaten. 26. The migration of Euploea cor, Euploea sylvester, Tyriamala septentrionus, and Tyriamala limnaeus between the Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats in India cover up to 350 to 400 kilometers. This migration happens twice a year. The most probable reasons seem to be the heavy monsoons, reproductive diapause, and a lack of host plants, nectar and alkaloidal resource availability. The gatekeeper butterfly Pyronia tithonus from southern and eastern Britain has been expanding to northern Britain over the past 3 decades, despite their preference for warmer conditions. 27. The clouded yellow Coleus crassius migrates between Europe and Siberia to northern Africa and southern Asia. 28, 29, 30, 31. In North America, the true armyworm moth, Mythimna unipuncta, and the black cutworm moth, Agrotis ypsilon, migrate north in the spring to escape dangerously warm temperatures and migrate south in the fall to avoid extremely cold weather. The reproductive systems in both females and males are less developed during the southbound migration, and calling behavior increases in the northbound migration, indicating that mating is more favored. The reproductive systems in both females and males are less developed during the southbound migration, and calling behavior increases in the northbound migration, indicating that mating is more favored in the summer. 32, 33. Anagrapha falcifera, a celery looper, is another migratory moth in the United States. 34. Tyriamala. Septentrionus. Vanessa cardui. Appias albina. Catopsilia pomona. Euploea cor. Euploea sylvester. Example species, Macroglossum stellatarum. The green areas are the areas where Macroglossum stellatarum can survive year-round. In the blue areas it can be found in summer. In the yellow area it is found in winter. Macroglossum stellatarum is a moth that is recorded in the subtropical part of the Palearctic realm year-round. In summer, the species disperses north up to Scandinavia and Iceland. In winter it migrates further south, deeper into Africa and to the Indian subcontinent. In the Netherlands and Belgium, there are 100 to 200 records per year in an average year. In warm summers, however, like 2005 and 2006, several thousand are recorded. 35. In mild winters, small numbers can survive this far north, but these numbers are insufficient to call it a real population. 3. Causes. Usually, butterflies and moths migrate to escape from potentially harmful circumstances. Examples of this are a shortage of proper food plants, an unfavorable climate, like cold or extreme rain, or overpopulation. Migration and evolution. A phenomenon like migration is an evolutionary development. By migrating, the species has survived the process of natural selection. There are a number of advantages and disadvantages to migration. An example of this is the protozoan Ophryacistus electroshera, a parasite of the monarch. Severely infected individuals are weak, unable to expand their wings, or unable to eclose, and have shortened lifespans, but parasite levels vary in populations. This is not the case in laboratory or commercial rearing, where after a few generations, all individuals can be infected. 36. Infection with this parasite creates an effect known as culling, whereby migrating monarchs that are infected are less likely to complete the migration. This results in overwintering populations with lower parasite loads. 37. Recording. Record of a massive appearance of presumably Agrias convolvuli in 1719 near Turnau. Butterflies, and to a lesser extent moths, migrating in large numbers are a noteworthy sight, which is easy to observe and track. There are several historic records about migrating butterflies. There are records dating back to 1100 about migrating butterflies, probably a Pieris species, from Bavaria to the Duchy of Saxony, and from 1248 about the migration of yellow butterflies in Japan. When flying at high altitudes, spotting migrating butterflies or moths can be hard. Low-flying species are easily spotted or caught using a light trap. When individuals fly too high for these methods, air balloons equipped with nets are used at times. Alternatively, radar is used to monitor migration. 12. Another registration technique is marking the wings with tiny stickers, a technique comparable with bird ringing. This technique has not proven to be very successful though. 7. Advances in technology might make it possible to equip individuals with microtransmitters in the future. Migration and climate change. Global warming has caused an increase of migratory butterflies and moths that reach northwestern European countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. Research in the United Kingdom confirms that an increasing number of migrants reach the country. Because one would expect that migratory species can adapt to new circumstances quite well, the researchers warn for new species that can have a negative impact on native species and possible damage to both health, species like the oak processionary, and agriculture. 38. Effects of migration change and falling numbers. Changes in migration patterns can have serious implications for the surrounding environment. Butterflies are considered a keystone species. Their residence in a habitat is a key indicator of the changes in migration patterns can have serious implications for the surrounding environment. Butterflies are considered a keystone species. Their residence in a habitat is a key indicator of the health of the ecosystem. 39. Butterflies serve a multitude of purposes within an ecosystem, including promoting genetic diversity, 40, through pollination, and serving as a food source for many birds. Agriculturally, butterflies are important pollinators and are responsible for pollinating many herbs or root vegetables. An estimated 90% of the food we consume is affected by pollination, and more directly, approximately 75% of flowering plants. 41. The loss of butterflies could lead to a decline in agricultural production and quality of crops, as the pollination of crops via butterflies promotes genetic diversity, which can help crops adapt to fight off new pests and diseases. Agricultural practices like using pesticides and grazing, 42, have negative impact on butterfly numbers. A loss in butterflies also means a loss in biological wealth. Butterflies are known as the flying flower, 39, as they are beautiful and carry a large aesthetic value. Dwindling numbers and the following decline of ecosystems will lead to greater loss of biological wealth over time, as without pollinators many plants will not grow or bloom. Many scientists have analyzed data, revealing that the monarch butterfly population has declined significantly since the 1980s and the 1990s. The causes of the recent decline are lodging, falling trees, global warming, reduction of milkweed to breeding places, and the drought in areas butterflies roost. However, the biggest limiting factors to the species is climate change. Warmer temperatures over time are changing weather patterns and disrupting the usual balance of nature. This poses many risks to human beings and all other forms of life on Earth. Some examples of threatened or endangered American butterflies include Carner blue. They are most commonly found in the Midwest and the cause of their decline is the loss of lupine plant. Palos verde. They are most commonly found in Los Angeles and their cause of decline is disruption of habitats by humans. Pawnee montane skipper. They are most commonly found in Colorado. Their cause of decline is due to the destruction of habitat by humans. Lepidoptera migrans. Butterfly gardening. Butterfly gardening is a way to create, improve, and maintain habitat for lepidopterans including butterflies, skippers, and moths. Two butterflies have four distinct life stages: egg, larva, chrysalis, and adult. In order to support and sustain butterfly populations, an ideal butterfly garden contains habitat for each life stage. A monarch butterfly, Danaus plexippus, feeding on butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. Monarch populations have been declining in abundance due to loss of habitat in the United States and deforestation at overwintering grounds in Mexico. 1. Butterfly larvae, with some exceptions such as the carnivorous harvester, Phenaceca tarquinius, consume plant matter and can be generalists or specialists. While butterflies like the painted lady, Vanessa cardui, 3, are known to consume over 200 plants as caterpillars, other species like the monarch, Danaus plexippus, 4, and the regal fritillary, Spirea idalia, 5, only consume plants in one genus, milkweed and violets, respectively. As adults, butterflies feed mainly on nectar, but they have also evolved to consume rotting fruit, tree sap, and even carrion. 6. Supporting nectarivorous adult butterflies involves planting nectar plants of different heights, color, and bloom times. Butterfly bait stations can easily be made to provide a food source for species that prefer fruit and sap. In addition to food sources, windbreaks in the form of trees and shrubs shelter butterflies and can provide larval food and overwintering grounds. 7. Puddling is a behavior generally done by male butterflies in which they gather to drink nutrients and water, and incorporating a puddling ground for butterflies will enhance a butterfly garden. 8. 9. While butterflies are not the only pollinators, creating butterfly habitat also creates habitat for bees, beetles, flies, and other pollinators. 7. Reasoning. A monarch way station near the town of Berwyn Heights in Prince George's County, Maryland, June 2017. Butterfly gardening provides a recreational activity to view butterflies interacting with the environment. Besides anthropocentric values of butterfly gardening, creating habitat reduces the impacts of habitat fragmentation and degradation. Habitat degradation is a multivariate issue. Development, increased use of pesticides and herbicides, woody encroachment, and non-native plants are contributing factors to the decline in butterfly and pollinator habitat. 10. Pollination is one ecological service butterflies provide. About 90% of flowering plants and 35% of crops rely on animal pollination. 10. 11. Butterfly gardens and monarch way stations, even in developed urban areas, provide habitat. 12. That increases the diversity of butterflies and other pollinators, including bees, flies, and beetles. 13. Ground truthing. Before buying plants and digging into the soil, ground truthing is a necessary first step. Ground truthing involves surveying a property in order to assess the current resources available. Some aspects to keep in mind are the following: south-facing slopes, natural wind breaks, present plant species, present butterfly species. Butterflies are ectothermic and rely on solar radiation for their metabolism. South-facing slopes are an ideal location for a butterfly garden, as they provide the most solar radiation in the northern hemisphere. The opposite is true in the southern hemisphere. Where native, shrubs and trees such as spicebush, Lindera benzoin papa, Asamina triloba, Sassafras albidum, and black cherry Prunus serratina provide windbreaks for butterflies and can also be their host. Plants. 14-15. Plants. A coral hairstreak, Satyrium titus, resting on a clump of grass. The larva will feed upon species in the family Rosaceae, including cherry Prunus serratina. 15. The types of plants used in a butterfly garden will determine the species of butterflies that will visit the garden. Lepidoptera Societies and the Plants Database of the United States Department of Agriculture's, USDA's, Natural Resources Conservation Service provide state and county-level distribution maps of specific plants. 16 published lists of host plants for butterflies and other pollinators can help select the plant species desired in the garden. 17. While non-native plants can provide floral resources to a garden, they can also have an overall negative effect on butterflies and other pollinators. 10. Therefore, it is often recommended to use native plants. It is also important to check invasive species lists to ensure that plants are not invasive in a given locality or region. The Invasive Plant Atlas of the United States and similar publications can help provide such information. 18. Depending on the zone, some butterfly-attracting plants include purple coneflower Echinacea purpurea buttonbush Cephalanthus occidentalis, yellow coneflowers, sunflowers, marigolds, poppies, cosmos, salvias, some lilies, asters, coreopsis, daisies, Joe pieweed Eutrochium verbenus, blue mist shrub Caryopteris times clandinensis lantanas, liatris, milkweed especially for the monarch butterfly, whose caterpillars feed solely on this plant, zinnias, pentas, porterweeds, and others. 19. A USDA Conservation Planting Guide for Maryland recommends that, for optimum wildlife and pollinator habitat in mesic sites, especially for monarchs, a seed mix should contain 6.0% common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca, by weight and 2.0% by seed. 20. Another such USDA guide for Maryland states that for herbaceous plantings, non-competitive bunch grasses e.g., broom sedge Andropogon virginicus, little bluestem, Schizocurium scoparium, purple top Tridens flavus, may be included in a seed mix for native plants at a low rate, less than 25% of the mix based on pure live seed per square foot, 0.9 square meters. 21. The eastern monarch migration largely depends upon only 3 milkweed species: common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca, green antelope horn milkweed, Avoridis, and antelope horns milkweed, A. asperula. 22. Butterfly gardens and monarch waystations in eastern and central North America should therefore feature one or more of those species, depending upon the areas in which the species are native. Install flowering native trees and shrubs that also feed native butterfly caterpillars. For example, black cherry Prunus serratina, a tree that is native to most of the eastern half of the United States, has white flowers that provide nectar to pollinators during the spring. P. serratina hosts the caterpillars of more than 450 species of butterflies and moths, including those of the eastern tiger swallowtail Papilio glaucus, red-spotted purple, white admiral, Limonitis arthemis, viceroy, Limonitis archippus, and cherry gall azure, Celastrina serratina, butterflies and the Cecropia, Hyalophora cecropia, Promethea silkmouth, Calosamia promethea, Polyphemus, Anthorea polyphemus, small-eyed sphinx, Paeonias myops, wild cherry sphinx, Sphinx strapiferarum, banded tussock, Halicidota tessellaris. Spotted apatelodes, Apatelodes torrefacta, and band-edged prominent moths. 23. Sassafras albidum, a tree that is native to the eastern half of the United States, has yellow, green, and brown flowers that provide nectar to pollinators during the spring. S. albidum hosts the caterpillars of 37 species of butterflies and moths, including the eastern tiger swallowtail, spicebush swallowtail Papilio troilus, Palamedes swallowtail Papilio palamedes, and pale swallowtail Papilio eurymedon, butterflies and the Cecropia, Promethea silkmouth, Polyphemus, imperialis, and Eo automaris Eo moths. 24. Spicebush Lindera benzoin, a shrub that is native to the eastern half of the United States, has white, yellow, and green flowers that also provide nectar to pollinators during the spring. L. benzoin hosts the caterpillars of the spicebush swallowtail and eastern tiger swallowtail butterflies and the Promethea silkmouth. 25. Avoid cultivars of plants unless they are more resistant to diseases than their native parents or that investigations have proven to be more beneficial to pollinators than their parents. Many cultivars are sterile and produce no nectar or pollen. As a result, their flowers do not benefit butterflies and other pollinators. Some have double flowers. Their reproductive parts have been converted into extra petals and therefore do not produce floral rewards for pollinators. Some cultivars have reduced nutritional benefits, and have not been studied enough to identify those that may be harming pollinators. 26. Cultivars with features that significantly affect flower structure and/or color are those that are likely to alter their appeal to pollinators. Those selected for foliage color may be toxic to insects. Studies have shown that altering leaf color, and the chemical changes that this implies, reduces a plant's ability to serve as a resource for herbivorous insects. 27. Buddleia davidi, which is often called butterfly bush, attracts many butterflies. 28. As it originated in China, it is presently planted in many parts of the world in which it is non-native. 28. In such settings, the plant feeds many native butterflies and other adult pollinators, but not many of their larvae. 29. As B. davidi is invasive in some areas, plantings of the species are controversial. 29. 30. To prevent seeding and to promote further flowering, its blossoms need to be removed deadheaded, as soon as they are spent. 28. A number of Buddleia cultivars have become available that have a variety of sizes and blossom colors. University studies have suggested that nectaring butterflies have greater preferences for some of these than for others, with lo and behold Blue Chip and Pink Delight heading a list of 11. 31. Some Buddleia cultivars are either sterile or produce less than 2% viable seed. C. Non-invasive Buddleia cultivars. 28, 29, 32, 33. The state of Oregon, which designates B. davidi as a noxious weed, and initially prohibited entry, transport, purchase, sale or propagation of all of its varieties, amended its quarantine in 2009 to permit those cultivars when approved or when proven to be interspecific hybrids. 28, 29, 32, 34. Monarch Watch recommends planting only male sterile, flutterbee, cultivars. 35. It is important to avoid purchasing plants and seeds treated with insecticides such as neonicotinoids. Although not yet conclusive, there is increasing evidence that neonicotinoids can have negative effects on pollinating insects, including butterflies. 36. Puddling. Group of Lysandra coridon puddling. Puddling refers to the behavior of male butterflies congregating on wet soil, dung, and carrion to feed on nutrients, specifically sodium. 8. Nectar is low in sodium, and sodium is a limiting nutrient for Lepidoptera. Male butterflies are able to transfer sodium to females during copulation. The sodium is passed on to offspring and increases reproductive success. 9. To create a simple puddling habitat, fill a shallow dish like a draining tray for a pot with wet sand. To increase the nutrients, mix compost with the sand. Add footholds for butterflies by adding different sized rocks. Baiting. There are numerous recipes for creating butterfly bait, but they have common ingredients. Fermentation is the key to a good bait, as it mimics the fermentation of rotting fruit and sap in the natural environment. 37. Recipes include blending rotten fruit, i.e. bananas, with beer, maple syrup, molasses, or sugar. Often yeast is added as well to the mixture and left to ferment for a week. Urine is also known to attract fruit-feeding butterflies. 38. The bait can be laid on stumps, rocks, and tree limbs. Problems. There are diseases that afflict butterflies, such as bacteria in the genus Pseudomonas, the nuclear polyhedrosis virus, and Ophryacistis electrochara, which only infects queen butterflies and monarch butterflies. In the absence of pesticides, aphids and true bugs may infest plants. Some gardeners release ladybugs, ladybirds, and other biological pest control agents that do not harm butterflies in order to control aphids. However, the release of ladybugs is not desirable in the United States and in many other locations, where the invasive Chinese ladybug Harmonia axaritis is often the species released. Perhaps more importantly, ladybugs and other predatory or parasitic insects can prey on butterfly and moth caterpillars and pupae even if they do not do so on adult Lepidoptera. As an alternative, one can wait for local predatory insects to find the aphids. One can hasten this process if an infestation is high by spraying the plants with a mix of sugar and water, simulating aphid honeydew. This is known to attract lacewings whose larvae eat aphids. 39. One can also spray the plants with water, or rinse the plants with a mild detergent, water solution, although caterpillars should be relocated before suds are applied. Scented detergents are acceptable, those containing OxiClean should be avoided. The aphids will turn black within a day, and eventually fall off. Another technique is to plant a variety of different flowers, including ones that attract hoverflies and parasitic braconid wasps, Braconidae, whose larvae kill pest species. Further, some caterpillars such as those of the harvester butterfly, Pheneseca tarquinius, feed on certain species of aphids, but not on plants. 40. Caterpillars can exhaust their source of food in small home gardens before metamorphosis occurs. Installing multiple plants can help reduce the chance of running out of leaves. If raising monarchs, one can replace the expended milkweed with a slice of pumpkin or cucumber, which can serve as a substitute source of food for monarch caterpillars in their final fifth instar. 41. Plantings of tropical milkweed, bloodflower, Acarasibica, are problematic. Where planted or naturalized in the southern United States, the non-native Acarasibica hosts monarch reproduction throughout the winter. This may alter the butterflies' migratory and breeding instincts, thus causing them to avoid migration and subsequent breeding and to increase their risk of infection. 42. A monarch way station in Bowling Green, Ohio, near Toledo, May 2019. Monarch Watch provides information on rearing monarchs and their host plants. 43. Efforts to restore falling butterfly populations by establishing butterfly gardens and migrating monarch way stations require particular attention to the target species' food preferences and population cycles, as well to the conditions needed to propagate and maintain their food plants. 44. Awareness of different milkweed species is of vital importance. For example, in the Washington, D.C. area and elsewhere in the northeastern and midwestern United States, common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca, is among the most important food plants for monarch caterpillars. 45. Especially when its foliage is soft and fresh. As monarch reproduction in that area peaks in late summer, when most Syriaca leaves are old and tough, the plant needs to be cut back in June, July, or August, to assure that it will be regrowing rapidly when monarch reproduction reaches its peak. Similar conditions exist for showy milkweed, Aspesiosa, in Michigan and for green antelope horn milkweed, Avoritis, where it grows in the southern Great Plains and the western United States. 46. In addition, the seeds of Syriaca and some other milkweeds need periods of cold treatment, cold stratification, before they will germinate. 47. To protect seeds from washing away during heavy rains and from seed-eating birds, one can cover the seeds with a light fabric or with an 0.5 and 13 layer of straw mulch. 48. However, mulch acts as an insulator. Thicker layers of mulch can prevent seeds from germinating if they prevent soil temperatures from rising enough when winter ends. Further, few seedlings can push through a thick layer of mulch. 49. Many species of milkweed contain toxic cardiac glycosides, cardenolides. Monarch caterpillars deter predators by incorporating these chemical compounds into their bodies, where the toxins remain throughout the insect's lifetime. 50. Although monarch caterpillars will feed on butterfly weed, A. tuberosa, in butterfly gardens, it is typically not a heavily used host plant for the species. 51. The plant contains only low levels of cardiac glycosides. This may make a tuberosa unattractive to egg-laying monarchs. 52. Some other milkweeds have similar characteristics. 53. A. Tuberosa also has rough leaves and a layer of trichomes, which may inhibit oviposition or decrease a female's ability to sense leaf chemicals. 54. 55. As a result of these factors, reproducing monarchs lay fewer eggs on a tuberosa than they do on most other milkweeds. 54. 51. While the plant's colorful flowers provide nectar for many adult butterflies, a tuberosa may therefore be less suitable for use in butterfly gardens and monarch way stations than are other milkweed species. 54. Breeding monarchs prefer to lay eggs on swamp milkweed, A. incarnata. 56. A. incarnata is therefore often planted in butterfly gardens and monarch way stations to help sustain the butterflies' populations. 57. 58. However, A. incarnata is an early successional plant that usually grows at the margins of wetlands and in seasonally flooded areas. The plant is slow to spread via seeds, does not spread by runners and tends to disappear as vegetative densities increase and habitats dry out. 59. Although a butterfly gardening. Commercial butterfly breeding. Commercial butterfly breeding or captive butterfly breeding is the practice of breeding butterflies and moths in controlled environments to supply the stock to research facilities, universities, zoos, insectariums, elementary and secondary schools, butterfly exhibits, conservation organizations, nature centers, individuals, and other commercial facilities. Some butterfly and moth breeders limit their market to wholesale customers while other breeders supply smaller volumes of stock as a retail activity. Some small-scale and larger-scale breeders limit their businesses to the provision of butterflies or moths for schools. Others provide butterflies to be used and released in commemorative events. 1. The release usually occurs in the natural range of the butterfly. Captive bred butterflies are used in the classroom. History. 5000 BC to 1976. Sericulture in Hoin, Vietnam. Commercial breeding of Lepidoptera has a long history. Rearing of silkworms Bombyx mori on mulberry trees for the production of raw silk, also known as sericulture, has been underway for at least 5,000 years in China. 2. 3. It is dependent on humans for its reproduction and does not occur naturally in the wild. The silkworm was domesticated from the wild silk myth Bombyx mandarina, which ranges from northern India to northern China, Korea, Japan, and the far eastern regions of Russia. The domesticated silkworm derives from Chinese rather than Japanese or Korean stock. 4. 5. Silkworms were unlikely to have been domestically bred before the Neolithic age. Before then, the tools required to facilitate the manufacturing of larger quantities of silk thread had not been developed. The domesticated bee mori and the wild bee mandarina can still breed and sometimes produce hybrids. 6. 342. 1977 present. Serious commercial breeding activity began in 1977. At this time, the tomato industry on Guernsey had become bankrupt and unused greenhouses remained. 7. An entrepreneur purchased a vacant greenhouse and filled it with tropical plants, creating a tropical jungle environment. Butterflies from Asia were acquired and set free within the enclosure. The newly constructed enclosure contained a waterfall and a small stream. The structure was then open to the public. In 1977, there was no access to commercial butterfly breeders in tropical regions, so the stock was obtained from amateur lepidopterists who periodically provided a few dozen butterflies to the exhibit. The Guernsey Butterfly exhibit was a commercial success. Butterfly exhibits quickly gained a positive reputation with investors. They were seen as novel commercial activities generating a return in a short time. The butterfly exhibit industry continued to expand in 1980 and until 1988 in the United Kingdom. New exhibits were started every year. Some were separate exhibits, while others were part of wealthy estates. Other commercial exhibits were added onto already existing businesses, such as garden supply centers. The new butterfly exhibits had varying results. Some exhibits were not as labor-intensive and were started hastily in order to maximize short-term profit. One owner pinned his dead butterflies onto flowers to cut costs. Other exhibitors sought to improve their exhibits to increase the public's enjoyment. These developed exhibits began. Other exhibitors sought. One owner pinned his dead butterflies onto flowers to cut costs. Other exhibitors sought to improve their exhibits to increase the public's enjoyment. These developed exhibits began to set long-term profit goals. Commercial butterfly breeding and exhibitions have developed rapidly over the past 20 years, putting unprofitable exhibitors out of business. European butterfly exhibits are now supplied by regulated butterfly brokers. In 1981, full-time professional distributor supplied live butterfly stock Entomological livestock supplies. Other suppliers have formed since then. Brokers import butterfly pupae from around the world. Leading producers of butterfly pupae are the United States, El Salvador, Suriname, Ecuador, Malaysia, Kenya, Philippines, Thailand, and Costa Rica. 8. Butterfly exhibits and commercial captive breeding have flourished in Canada and the United States. North America's largest butterfly exhibit is the Niagara Parks Butterfly Conservatory. It opened in 1996 and is a $15 million facility. The conservatory can accommodate up to 300 visitors per hour. The glass dome that contains the conservatory is 1,022 square meters, 11,000 square feet, in size with 180 meters, 590 feet, of paths inside the greenhouse. Breeding practices and procedure. Some breeders are able to generate substantial income. Large operations require large, paid, and trained staff. Training and certification. Commercial and captive breeders often begin their operations after raising butterflies as a hobby and then expanding this into a business. Many butterfly breeders consider themselves to be hobbyists and limit their breeding to providing butterflies to their friends, families, and schools at no cost. 1. Commercial and hobbyist breeders are often members of the International Butterfly Breeders Association, IBBA, and the Association for Butterflies, AFB. 9. A breeder typically begins their operation by obtaining breeding stock from a reputable supplier of healthy stock screened for the disease. Most breeders in southern states are able to overwinter their stock, enabling them to provide butterflies to customers year-round if the ambient temperatures are supportive of flight and the survival of the butterfly. Many breeders in northern latitudes that experience cold winters or repeated frosts shut down for the winter months. Breeders are trained in infection control, health monitoring, disease prevention, laboratory techniques, and biological pest control. 10. 11. Methods. Captive breeders employ cost-effective and sustainable methods of plant propagation needed to provide larval food for their stock. Greenhouses, hydroponics, drip irrigation, and organic-based methods control disease costs and create high plant yields. Pesticides are not used in the breeding of stock. Captive breeders reduce the exposure of laboratory-bred stock to naturally occurring predators, parasites, and diseases that affect wild stock by rearing butterflies in enclosed environments. Larva room. The butterfly and moth larvae are typically raised in containers in various densities dependent upon the predetermined protocols. Some butterfly larvae are best raised in lower densities and others at higher densities. Breeding operations can include other environmental controls such as humidity and temperature. Larger breeding operations require hiring employees who are then trained to grow larval food, maintain the grounds, sustain controlled environments, make shipments, advise receiving organizations on the proper care of butterfly stock. Host plants. Breeders grow host plants for the larvae that they are raising. Many of them have greenhouses enclosed to protect the food plants from being contaminated by parasites, predators, and adverse environmental conditions. The plants raised in these greenhouses grow faster and stronger due to the methods employed by the breeders. Hydroponic growing of larval food plants. Different species of butterflies need different host plants. Some larvae are limited to one type of host plant while other larvae are referred to as generalists and are able to use a variety of host plants. Proper care for the host plants is important to ensure a large and healthy stock. Microsporidium, a fungal parasite that originates from host plants, can kill 100% of larvae hatched from infected eggs. This disease is transferred from larvae to adults. Infected larvae initially show no visible symptoms. This infection is detected with a microscope. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, regulates the interstate shipment of captive commercially bred butterflies. The USDA allows shipments to areas and regions within the natural range of the butterfly. Some states have their own regulations to govern the shipping and release of commercially bred stock. Canada also regulates the shipment of butterflies. The United States Department of Agriculture does not regulate butterfly releases and breeding done within the boundaries of a state. Butterflies, moths, and almost all other species of animals and plants are not allowed to be removed from federal land and are not considered a source of butterflies for release. Fines are applied to those who collect from federal lands. Only 6 species of butterflies can be shipped across state lines in the United States. Butterfly houses, conservatories, and exhibits can receive butterflies and moths from outside of the United States. These shipments are regulated and do not allow the release of butterflies from these controlled environments. The shipments are also regulated by the United States Department of Agriculture. The same operations do receive shipments of native butterflies from breeders within the United States who have the proper permits. Market-driven competition determines the price of butterflies supplied to customers and wholesalers. 1. Some commercial breeders limit their shipments to wholesale customers like butterfly houses, conservatories, and exhibits. Other breeders ship directly to customers who use the butterflies in various venues. 1. Breeders ship stock in all ages of the life cycle of the butterfly to elementary and secondary schools throughout the United States, subject to the shipping regulations of the USDA. 1. Event organizers sometimes purchase butterflies from breeders to be released during events such as funerals, hospice activities, bar mitzvahs, 9/11 memorial events, and weddings. Captive bred stock is purchased by researchers. 12. National regulation, U.S. Commercial activity. Captive butterfly breeding has been used to replenish extirpated populations of butterflies. An example of this was the commercial breeding of the Schaus swallowtail, also known as Papilio aristotemus. This species of butterfly is native to the Florida Keys and in 2012, there were only 4 left in the wild. 13. Their population has been successfully restored since then by captive butterfly breeders at the University of Florida. The breeding program produced more than 1,000 larvae within 2 years. 13. International economic impact. Butterfly farming has been successful in increasing economic opportunities for local people in Ecuador and Costa Rica. Butterfly farming also promotes conservation activities and education. 3.14. Commercial butterfly breeding in developing countries is a practical and sustainable field. It is environmentally non-destructive, uses available raw materials, economically and environmentally sustainable. Commercial butterfly breeding can be considered ethical because it does not harm or degrade the people involved in it or the environment that sustains it. In contrast to the clear-cutting of natural habitats, a butterfly farming operation is dependent upon native plant species. A butterfly farmer keeps areas of land intact with naturally occurring vegetation. Commercial butterfly farmers plant native plants on the property, providing food sources for the caterpillars. Commercial butterfly breeders generate employment and support the rural economy. It inhibits rural to urban movement patterns. Some national governments in these countries have established protections for the maintenance of butterfly ranching. In Papua New Guinea, the Insect Farming and Trading Agency oversees and regulates sustainable butterfly ranching. 15. 16. Commercially bred monarchs migrate to overwintering sites in Mexico, expanding the knowledge of migratory behavior. 17. Potential risks. Some are concerned with the possible negative effects of captive breeding. 18. Reduction of biodiversity. Commercial and captive breeding releases of painted lady and monarch butterflies have been criticized for their potential of reducing biodiversity in wild populations. The homogeneity of the genome of the monarch has been determined and is unprecedented, across its worldwide range. 19. This is why a recent major goal of captive breeding programs is the preservation of maximum genetic variability within a species. Sampling butterflies from several genetic lineages can help promote biodiversity within captive bred groups. 20. Disease and parasite transmission. Butterfly releases have been criticized for having the potential of spreading disease and promoting the proliferation of more virulent strains of parasites. Parasitic strains of Ophryacistis electrochira have been found to be the most virulent in the western population of the monarch butterfly. When monarchs in the eastern population were inoculated with the parasite found in the western population, the eastern monarchs were more resistant to the parasite than western monarchs. When monarchs from the western population were inoculated with the parasite found on eastern monarchs, no significant differences were observed. The degree of variation can be attributed to different variations in the host and parasitic conditions. 21. Overutilization. Butterfly releases have been criticized because the monarch butterfly population is being overutilized. Breeders often use wild monarch butterflies to initiate their seasonal breeding. The released butterflies add to the population of wild monarchs. Petition to have the monarch butterfly designated as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Adoption of the designation to have the monarch butterfly as threatened would prohibit the release of commercially bred monarchs, subject to substantial fines and penalties. 22. Breeders grow host plants for the larvae that they are raising. Many of them have greenhouses enclosed to protect the food plants from being contaminated by parasites, predators, and adverse environmental conditions. The plants raised in these greenhouses grow faster and stronger due to the methods employed by the breeders. Hydroponic growing of larval food plants. Different species of butterflies need different host plants. Some larvae are limited to one type of host plant while other larvae are referred to as generalists and are able to use a variety of host plants. Proper care for the host plants is important to ensure a large and healthy stock. Microsporidium, a fungal parasite that originates from host plants, can kill 100% of larvae hatched from infected eggs. This disease is transferred from larvae to adults. Infected larvae initially show no visible symptoms. This infection is detected with a microscope. The United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, regulates the interstate shipment of captive commercially bred butterflies. The USDA allows shipments to areas and regions within the natural range of the butterfly. Some states have their own regulations to govern the shipping and release of commercially bred stock. Canada also regulates the shipment of butterflies. The United States Department of Agriculture does not regulate butterfly releases and breeding done within the boundaries of a state. Butterflies, moths, and almost all other species of animals and plants are not allowed to be removed from federal land and are not considered a source of butterflies for release. Fines are applied to those who collect from federal lands. Only 6 species of butterflies can be shipped across state lines in the United States. Butterfly houses, conservatories, and exhibits can receive butterflies and moths from outside of the United States. These shipments are regulated and do not allow the release of butterflies from these controlled environments. The shipments are also regulated by the United States Department of Agriculture. The same operations do receive shipments of native butterflies from breeders within the United States who have the proper permits. Market-driven competition determines the price of butterflies supplied to customers and wholesalers. 1. Some commercial breeders limit their shipments to wholesale customers like butterfly houses, conservatories, and exhibits. Other breeders ship directly to customers who use the butterflies in various venues. 1. Breeders ship stock in all ages of the life cycle of the butterfly to elementary and secondary schools throughout the United States, subject to the shipping regulations of the USDA. 1. Event organizers sometimes purchase butterflies from breeders to be released during events such as funerals, hospice activities, bar mitzvahs, 9/11 memorial events, and weddings. Captive bred stock is purchased by researchers. 12. National regulation, U.S. Commercial activity. Captive butterfly breeding has been used to replenish extirpated populations of butterflies. An example of this was the commercial breeding of the Schaus swallowtail, also known as Papilio aristotimus. This species of butterfly is native to the Florida Keys and in 2012, there were only 4 left in the wild. 13. Their population has been successfully restored since then by captive butterfly breeders at the University of Florida. The breeding program produced more than 1,000 larvae within 2 years. 13. International economic impact. Butterfly farming has been successful in increasing economic opportunities for local people in Ecuador and Costa Rica. Butterfly farming also promotes conservation activities and education. 3.14. Commercial butterfly breeding in developing countries is a practical and sustainable field. It is environmentally non-destructive, uses available raw materials, economically and environmentally sustainable. Commercial butterfly breeding can be considered ethical because it does not harm or degrade the people involved in it or the environment that sustains it. In contrast to the clear-cutting of natural habitats, a butterfly farming operation is dependent upon native plant species. A butterfly farmer keeps areas of land intact with naturally occurring vegetation. Commercial butterfly farmers plant native plants on the property, providing food sources for the caterpillars. Commercial butterfly breeders generate employment and support the rural economy. It inhibits rural to urban movement patterns. Some national governments in these countries have established protections for the maintenance of butterfly ranching. In Papua New Guinea, the Insect Farming and Trading Agency oversees and regulates sustainable butterfly ranching. 15.16 Commercially bred monarchs migrate to overwintering sites in Mexico, expanding the knowledge of migratory behavior. 17. Potential risks. Some are concerned with the possible negative effects of captive breeding. 18. Reduction of biodiversity. Commercial and captive breeding releases of painted lady and monarch butterflies have been criticized for their potential of reducing biodiversity in wild populations. The homogeneity of the genome of the monarch has been determined and is unprecedented, across its worldwide range. 19. This is why a recent major goal of captive breeding programs is the preservation of maximum genetic variability within a species. Sampling butterflies from several genetic lineages can help promote biodiversity within captive bred groups. 20. Disease and parasite transmission. Butterfly releases have been criticized for having the potential of spreading disease and promoting the proliferation of more virulent strains of parasites. Parasitic strains of Ophryacistis electrochira have been found to be the most virulent in the western population of the monarch butterfly. When monarchs in the eastern population were inoculated with the parasite found in the western population, the eastern monarchs were more resistant to the parasite than western monarchs. When monarchs from the western population were inoculated with the parasite found on eastern monarchs, no significant differences were observed. The degree of variation can be attributed to different variations in the host and parasitic conditions. 21. Overutilization. Butterfly releases have been criticized because the monarch butterfly population is being overutilized. Breeders often use wild monarch butterflies to initiate their seasonal breeding. The released butterflies add to the population of wild monarchs. Petition to have the monarch butterfly designated as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Adoption of the designation to have the monarch butterfly as threatened would prohibit the release of commercially bred monarchs, subject to substantial fines and penalties. 22. Commercial butterfly breeding. Butterfly. Butterflies are winged insects from the Lepidopteran suborder Rhopalocera, characterized by large, often brightly colored wings that often fold together when at rest, and a conspicuous, fluttering flight. The group comprises the superfamilies Heteloidea, moth butterflies in the Americas, and Populionoidea, all others. The oldest butterfly fossils have been dated to the Paleocene, about 56 million years ago, though they likely originated in the late Cretaceous, about 101 million years ago. 1. Butterflies have a four-stage life cycle, and like other holometabolous insects they undergo complete metamorphosis. 2. Winged adults lay eggs on the food plant on which their larvae, known as caterpillars, will feed. The caterpillars grow, sometimes very rapidly, and when fully developed, pupate in a chrysalis. When metamorphosis is complete, the pupal skin splits, the adult insect climbs out, expands its wings to dry, and flies off. Some butterflies, especially in the tropics, have several generations in a year, while others have a single generation, and a few in cold locations may take several years to pass through their entire life cycle. 3. Butterflies are often polymorphic, and many species make use of camouflage, mimicry, and aposematism to evade their predators. 4. Some, like the monarch and the painted lady, migrate over long distances. Many butterflies are attacked by parasites or parasitoids, including wasps, protozoans, flies, and other invertebrates, or are preyed upon by other organisms. Some species are pests because in their larval stages they can damage domestic crops or trees. Other species are agents of pollination of some plants. Larvae of a few butterflies, e.g., harvesters, eat harmful insects, and a few are predators of ants, while others live as mutualists in association with ants. Culturally, butterflies are a popular motif in the visual and literary arts. The Smithsonian Institution says, butterflies are certainly one of the most appealing creatures in nature. 5. Possibly the original butterfly. 6. A male brimstone, Gnepteryx rhamni, in flight. The Oxford English Dictionary derives the word straightforwardly from Old English Butterfliege, butterfly. Similar names in Old Dutch and Old High German show that the name is ancient, but modern Dutch and German use different words, vlinder and schmetterling, and the common name often varies substantially between otherwise closely related languages. A possible source of the name is the bright yellow male of the brimstone, Gnepteryx rhamni. Another is that butterflies were on the wing in meadows during the spring and summer butter season while the grass was growing. 6. 7. The earliest Lepidoptera fossils date to the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, around 200 million years ago. 8. Butterflies evolved from moths, so while the butterflies are monophyletic, forming a single clade, the moths are not. The oldest known butterfly is Protociliades christenseni from the Paleocene aged fur formation of Denmark, approximately 55 million years old, which belongs to the family Hesperiidae skippers. 9. Molecular clock estimates suggest that butterflies originated sometime in the late Cretaceous, but only significantly diversified during the Cenozoic. 10. 1. With one study suggesting a North American origin for the group. 1. The butterflies. Temporal range, Cretaceous present. Papilio-Machaon. Scientific classification domain, Eukaryota kingdom, Animalia phylum, Arthropoda class, Insecta order, Lepidoptera suborder, Rhopalocera. Subgroup. Oldest American butterfly is the late Eocene Prodryas Persephone from the fluorescent fossil beds, 11-12, approximately 34 million years old. 13. Butterfly fossils. Prodryas Persephone, a late Eocene butterfly from the fluorescent fossil beds, 1887 engraving. Lithopsyche antiqua, an early Oligocene butterfly from the Bembridge Marls, Isle of Wight, 1889 engraving. Butterflies are divided into 7 families that contain a total of about 20,000 species. Rheodinidae. Taxonomy and phylogeny. Butterfly families. Family. American moth butterflies. Small, brown, like geometrid moths, antennae not clubbed, long slim abdomen. Hesperiidae skippers small, darting flight, clubs on antennae hooked backwards. Lycaenidae. Blues, coppers, hair streaks. Small, brightly colored, often have false heads with eye spots and small tails resembling antennae. Nymphalidae. Brush-footed or four-footed butterflies usually have reduced forelegs, so appear four-legged, often. Brightly colored. Populionidae swallowtails. Often have tails on wings. Caterpillar generates foul taste with osmeterium organ, pupa supported by silk girdle. Pieridae whites and allies. Mostly white, yellow or orange, some serious pests of Brassica, pupa supported by silk girdle. Rheodinidae metal marks. Often have metallic spots on wings, often conspicuously colored with black, orange and blue. Traditionally, butterflies have been divided into the superfamilies Populionoidea and the moth-like Heteloidea. Recent work has discovered that Heteloidae, the only family within Heteloidea, is nested within the Populionoidea, meaning that Populionoidea would be synonymous with Rhopalocera. The relationships between the rest of the 6 families are extremely well resolved, which is summarized in the below cladogram. 1, 14, 15. Populionoidea. Populionidae. Hedilidae. Hesperiidae. Pieridae. Nymphalidae. Lycaenidae. Rheodinidae. General description. A zoomed-in view of the wing scales on a Aglaeo, or peacock butterfly. Butterfly adults are characterized by their 4 scale-covered wings, which give the Lepidoptera their name, ancient Greek lepis lepis, scale plus pteron, wing. These scales give butterfly wings their color. They are pigmented with melanins that give them blacks and browns, as well as uric acid derivatives and flavonoids that give them yellows, but many of the blues, greens, reds and iridescent colors are created by structural coloration produced by the microstructures of the scales and hairs. 16, 17, 18, 19. Biology. Butterfly antennal shapes, mainly clubbed, unlike those of moths. Drawn by C. T. Bingham, 1905. As in all insects, the body is divided into 3 sections: the head, thorax, and abdomen. The thorax is composed of 3 segments, each with a pair of legs. In most families of butterfly the antennae are clubbed, unlike those of moths which may be thread-like or feathery. The long proboscis can be coiled when not in use for sipping nectar from flowers. 20. Unlike butterflies, most moths, like Lathopopuli, fly by night and hide by day. Nearly all butterflies are diurnal, have relatively bright colors, and hold their wings vertically above their bodies when at rest, unlike the majority of moths which fly by night, are often cryptically colored, well camouflaged, and either hold their wings flat touching the surface on which the moth is standing, or fold them closely over their bodies. Some day-flying moths, such as the hummingbird hawk moth, 21, are exceptions to these rules. 2022. Butterfly larvae, caterpillars, have a hard, sclerotized head with strong mandibles used for cutting their food, most often leaves. They have cylindrical bodies, with 10 segments to the abdomen, generally with short prolegs on segments 3 to 6 and 10. The 3 pairs of true legs on the thorax have 5 segments each. 20. Many are well camouflaged. Others are aposematic with bright colors and bristly projections containing toxic chemicals obtained from their food plants. The pupa or chrysalis, unlike that of moths, is not wrapped in a cocoon. 20. Sexual dimorphism in Anthocharis cardamines. Male. Female. Many butterflies are sexually dimorphic. Most butterflies have the ZW